I was drafted into the United States Army in 1967, and I joined to go into the Warrant Officer Flight Program. But I had a hearing deficiency, and they wouldn't let me do that right away, so I had to go in the regular military, which I did. I was in the 1st Infantry Division, my first tour in Vietnam as a helicopter machine gunner and mechanic. And then I went back to the United States to go to flight school in '69, but they said I had to re-enlist because they didn't have enough time, and I decided I didn't like it here in the States because of things going on. So I went back to Vietnam and was put into the 1st Aviation Brigade until I got out of the United States Army in August of 1970. I come from a military background family. Goes all the way back 260 plus years, 65 years. My earliest ancestor, 8th generation, was a German mercenary, Hessian mercenary, hired by the British to fight in the French and Indian War in 1756. He obviously did that and survived and either stayed here or whatever happened. Married a German gal, and their son and her brother were with George Washington at Valley Forge. That man's son was born in 1793 in Welsh Run, Pennsylvania. He was in the War of 1812 with Andrew Jackson, went down to New Orleans. The next one was a Civil War cavalry officer in the Union Army. He was not in the regular army. He was their militia. He was a cavalry officer, and then about the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. And then my great-grandfather, not the details weren't really great, but he was in the Indian Wars in Nebraska. My grandfather was in the Spanish-American War. He had 2 brothers who were in the First World War. My father was in World War II, was called up for Korea but didn't get to go. And I was a Vietnam combat veteran, and my daughter was in the Air Force. He was an Air Force cadet, but she resigned to marry a Marine fighter pilot. I was compelled to go. My father figured that I was going to be going into the military, and he said, well, pick something good that you can use it later. And I wasn't a good student, and by the time I was in the what was I in? I was in the Navy flight program, but once I got drafted, that was over. So I just decided to join because my family heritage was that. I wanted to see what this war was. It was a rude awakening. Well, it was terrifying. I came into the Long Bin base where the 90th replacement, and just before I get there, about 10 minutes, rockets came in and blew up a bunch of people in this compound, and all I had was a hunting knife in my bag. And of course you thought that the NVA were going to attack you. So man, it was scary. Didn't know what was going to happen. And then they said, well, you've been picked to be in the 1st Infantry Division. I says, I'm not infantry. Don't worry, they got helicopters. They are an iconic part of Vietnam. It's that's how we got anywhere. It was the whop, whop, whop is burned into your brain. I mean, I hear a Huey helicopter, I know exactly what it is. And so do the thousands and millions of men who were there. It's a great machine that I got to work on and know how to intricately put it back together again. I did get, some stick hours of the times that I was there. Get on the stick, I felt that I could put it on the ground without killing myself if I had to, but thank God that never happened. But so yes, I got to go I got to take the men out there to, in some cases, to their demise, and they got to stay in the mud and the blood and the fear, and I got to go home. I just went back to the base where we were. My worst day in Vietnam, if you got shot down or shot up, was that if you went down, which I did once, they picked us up and take us back. We would get taken back. And then the ground troops were quite excited about us too, because we were their lifeline, and so we brought their food, their ammo, took home their wounded and took out their caissons of their dead. And so they would go through hell to get us. But they had to stay there, and then we picked up and go back. I would miss a meal, showers were cold, and I didn't, we had TV there, and we would see everybody watch combat and Star Trek and laughing. That was my world. Theirs was nasty. Well, it was tremendously exciting. I mean, I was born to be a warrior, and I wanted to be a warrior, but my profession at that time was I was to transport. I was their support. And as a gunship guy, then I got to be part of take care of the enemy too. I did that at one time on my second tour. And so that was fulfilling in the fact that I was doing the right thing. We were the good guys. We were the guys in the white horses. We saved them. I went back to go to flight school, and I was ready to go, wanted to do that. And they said, well, Mr. Sergeant Kyser, you don't have enough time. You're going to have to re-enlist. And I said, oh, I'm not going to do that, because I knew I wanted to get out. But I didn't want to get stuck in some backwater place or stuck in the States. So I volunteered to go back to Vietnam, because by that time I felt I was bulletproof. And I wanted to go to Hong Kong and to Japan on those R&Rs. And that's really what it was. You have an attitude that it's not going to get me to get hit. Stuff happens, but it wasn't going to be me. And obviously it came true, because I came back. So I volunteered to go back to Vietnam, and I got my orders cut directly from the Pentagon to do that. Bulletproof. An oxymoron, because bullets penetrate everything. Now, I had a little chicken plate on me, we call it, a little ceramic thing here, and would glance to take an AK-47 round, could glance off that, but the rest of it was open. Yeah, I put one underneath my seat too, because my derriere was pretty important to me. I didn't even get that shot off. And so you just don't ever think it's going to be you. I had my aircraft shot up, bullet holes, but so at that time then I felt I'd had them snap by my ear, bullets back, that's interesting. They just make noises like that going by your ear. But then they punched a hole in the aircraft in doing that, and that made me mad, because who's going to have to work on that or cause us to crash? So we're just glad to get away. I never had fear that I was going to die. Some people said, get over it. Decide that you're going to die, and then just carry on. So I heard about that one time. Guy told me that. The infantry guy says, you're dead already, so just get over it. And then you're a short timer. When you come there, you don't know what's going on. You want to find somebody that, at least my age, I was older. I was 23 when I went to Vietnam my first time. And I was with guys who were 18 and 19 years old. And I was a college kid, thought I was pretty smart. Obviously I wasn't, because they asked me to leave, because I had too many probations. But you just wanted to be able to do the right thing. It's scary. I was in an infantry unit my first time. And so they're kind of crazy guys because they're out there in the boonies. I was behind the lines, but I would go out to pick up shot down aircraft. And that was always dicey because the Viet Cong or NVA would lay for you, because then they could shoot down two and you could pick up one. And that did happen. And then, just a mechanic there trying to get things done. But we were packing our weapons. So the part that was interesting about that is that you're just used to the sound of artillery rounds, shotguns going off, bullets flying, not so much at you, but somewhere. And you're just accustomed to the art of war. The difference I saw between the two times is my first tour was 1st Infantry Division. We're taking care of the infantry troops, and they were glad to see us because we were bringing them supplies and mail and food and ammo, and then take out their bad wounded, or else some guys were going home. Very pretty. The second year, though, drugs came into it. I didn't trust anyone who had drugs. I was a head crew chief of a S4 unit, which is the battalion commander's crew chief aircraft and 2 other training aircraft. And if I heard or knew any of those gentlemen, kids, were smoking rope or taking heroin, I didn't want anything to do with them, because he who hesitates dies in battle. That's what my father told me. He says, don't hesitate. So, and he was a retired Army colonel. Well, he wasn't retired at that time, but, and he was a battle-weary guy, so they actually had a difficult time with drugs in 1970. Things were winding down. Heroin addiction, marijuana was everywhere. Now, I wouldn't stand for it in my little group, and if I knew, because I was an NCO kind of, a Spec 5 sergeant. They were separate from me, but I would find out what was going on. I didn't have to kick anybody out, but I just had to tell some guys. I'd tell them, if I find out that you're smoking or doing anything, you're gone. I'm not going to do nothing to you, but you're going to be gone. Because people had gone down. I heard about fragging of the ground troops and fragging of officers. I mean, officers are good, bad, and ugly. It seemed like the World War II and Korea era veterans or officers there were more concerned about their retirement situation than were about us. The lieutenants and the captains, for the most part, were my age, and they were concerned about their own livelihood, but they were concerned about their men. Some colonels were great, a lot of them weren't. And they were punching their ticket. They called them ticket punchers from the Pentagon. As a lieutenant colonel, you had to do 6 months of combat leadership in order to get the next rank. And they would switch them out even quicker than 6 months. I've heard generals, if you go to the chart to see who was the battalion commander or the brigade commander in the chart of then during the Vietnam War, some of them would be there only 3 months. And that'd be 1 and 2 stars. And they'd move on for the next thing else. So they were, as it was told, my father told me, he says, they're trying to bleed as many because they thought it would be a short-term thing. Well, 10 years later, it was still not over. So and then the leadership was not telling us the truth, as the Vietnam era movies and Ken Burns things has pointed out to us, from Eisenhower on up, it was a drug culture. My gosh, that's how the Hmong made money. The CIA money was with drugs, and I actually saw a C-123 get caught at Tonsanut Airport with a whole cargo load of drugs. They arrested all, court-martialed them all, I suppose. Why would they take that chance? Well, because obviously they'd done it many times before. So that was really prevalent, and I was just glad to get out of there alive. My last day in country was a very interesting day. I mean, a prelude to this, I was still flying up to 24 days before. And that was the last time I went flying because we were looking for another helicopter that had crashed. And I probably shouldn't have went on that one. But we went out and outside the South China Sea, which is about 30, 40 miles east of where I were. And we were flying an area that was we were looking for something. So we were flying about 100 feet above the trees, and I happened to look down, and I'm seeing right below me 2 NVA walking with their rifles and their pith helmets. We had flown inadvertently over an NVA camp, and they looked up at me, and I looked down like them, and I went for my weapon, and I looked up, and here's an RPG coming right at me, and I thought, crap, I'm dead. I said, RPG, the pilot jerked on the collective. We went up a little bit, right under the skids. It would have hit me. I was scared spitless. And he said, man. And I said, after that, I'm done. So I then went on an R&R to Hong Kong after that and spent a lot of money buying 3 of everything, stereos, radios, cameras, everything that you could get with $3,000 for my brother, my father, and myself. And you only can take $1,000 out of Vietnam at that time, but I had took out my $1,000, and I called my brother, send me $2,000 in cash, and he did that. And I took home 1,900 pounds of whole baggage. He said, how did you do that? Well, we're aviators. We get to do anything we want. You're only supposed to take 500 pounds per place. So we'd fly, take my stuff to one place, jump off 500 pounds, show my orders, fly to another place, drop off another 500 pounds. Another place took 750. So I did 4 different places. 3 different places took the total of 1,900 pounds. And I have a picture of that in my garage coming home. So that I got out. My last day in the helicopter was, actually we got a new helicopter about 3 weeks before that in a brand new H model. And I went out to look at that aircraft just before I took off that next day, and just was walking back about 200 yards. 3 Katyusha rockets come in, and one of them hit that helicopter, burned it to the ground. Nice. I have a picture of that. It wasn't in the pictures that you have. Was toast. If I would have been there 15 minutes before that, maybe it would have hit me. So I left Vietnam the same way I came in, with rockets coming in and rockets going out. So I was home on the last day in Vietnam. I got out on a Monday, August 12th. You get home the same day. And I brought my war prize, my Tokarev pistol back, and my parents had greeted me. And I was back, and I'd already registered for college back again. I went to NDSU for 4 years, and I wanted to finish up at UND because they had a better program, and I could eliminate about 10 hours of F that I had at the other school as a transfer. And then I got into the aviation program. But I was in college. I got home on a Monday. I borrowed one of my parents' cars, drove up to Grand Forks, North Dakota, bought a car, came back, picked up my stuff, moved to an apartment that I'd got. I was back in college Thursday the same week. it was a little bit of culture shock for me, but we had at the University of North Dakota a fabulous veterans group there. And they were looking for guys like me. Obviously, I was older. I was 25, short haircut, tan, didn't look like some freshman. And I was just trying to take some basic courses to stay in school there. I'd already got registered. And they spotted me. Says, you're a veteran? I said, yeah. And he says, well, you come with us. And so the University of North Dakota didn't have any problem. There was no anti-war guys up there. This is 1970. The president of the university, Clark Clifford, was a retired Marine colonel from World War II, decorated guy, and he absolutely loved us. And so administration had no problem with us. We were not, there's even some veterans against the war guys there, and I said, I appreciate your thoughts, but don't try to get us involved. We won't mess with you. You don't mess with us. Don't be getting some anti-war stuff going here at the campus, because we will rain hell on you. And so they didn't do that, because we were a lot bigger than they were. I think we had 200 people in our veterans group, and they maybe had 10, so. That was how I got started back in college again. After I came back down to the Twin Cities, this is 1973 when I finally graduated. Got a degree in business and a commercial professional pilot's licenses, so I could try to get a job in the airlines. Well, they're going to hire a guy with 250 hours. All the jet jockeys and helicopter guys got out with 2,000 hours. They're hiring them. So I found employment down here, tried to anyway. It's a struggle. But there's anti-war people down here burning flags and rioting. The University of Minnesota was terrible. And of course, now as a young man, I did have a steady girlfriend from Grand Forks, so that was okay. But it was hard. And I asked her to marry me, and she did. And we moved down here. And I struggled with undiagnosed post-traumatic stress syndrome, not a disorder, syndrome. And I didn't really understand how I was. I was jumpy. I wasn't afraid of loud noises because I was used to loud noises. But I sat in certain buildings. I mean, I never got blown up, but you never trusted anything. It's just kind of the standard stuff. And I went to the VA for Agent Orange testing, and they said I didn't have it. Good, because I was around that. I watched it. I watched them put that over the fields out there. We flew through it, but I'm fortunate. I've never gotten it. But then I think, I thought at that time, post-traumatic stress was not diagnosed. You were either crazy, anger management, or just you're a schizophrenic. And I went to the VA, and I had anger management problems. I hated authority because I saw what they were doing to people in Vietnam. They couldn't trust the leadership, and then they came back, and the VA was not taking care of us. So it was because of the people who were running it were former military people themselves that didn't care about us. So I said, the heck with it. They weren't going to give me nothing, and they said I was might be schizophrenic, anger management problem. Of course, I couldn't imagine that. So it wasn't until the 1995 that they recognized it. And I got involved with the Vietnam Veterans of America as in the leadership role. And that was difficult too, because there were a lot of angry people in that organization. Then I went to a veterans parade here in downtown St. Paul. It was in early 1990 it was. And hey, I thought, and we had a parade downtown. There was nobody there except us. Nobody cared. And they had a guy at the state capitol, and so I got involved with them on just a chapter level. But then I got involved because of 9/11 hitting. I just knew I needed to do something else. I was having a difficult time with staying on mission statement in your business. I couldn't focus because I just knew that these kids were going to start getting killed. And so I asked my wife, who is a sweet lady, she was a successful businesswoman, and I got rid of my business, and she was able to, we're living in a big apartment complex that we could get reduction in payment for, and plus she was making a lot of money. And so then I became a veterans advocate, starting in 2001 with the POW MIA Day. That was, matter of fact, 9/11 happened and we did the POW Day about 4 days later. There was nothing flying. It was dead quiet, and that was the first one that I did. So I started doing things for somebody else other than myself. And then the World War II flyovers, the World War II memorial came into effect, and I could not have my father here because he passed away in 1974. He was a retired Army colonel and a successful businessman. He passed away on me. So I was involved with the Commemorative Air Force, and I says, let's put together the largest flyover in the history of Minnesota since World War II. And that took our Minnesota Vietnam Veterans Charity Car Donation Program was very successful, and we were able to get the money to pay for all those airplanes to fly over, pay their gas anyway. And so that was pretty cool to do that. And it was an extension then of my ability to let go of some of that anger, because these World War II guys, they could not believe what we're doing for them. And they weren't the people who were against us. That's a different group. And then the next year was even bigger. We had a 150th anniversary of the state of Minnesota. We put 30 airplanes together, those same kind of things. So I was approached then by the National Organization for Honor Flight. It's a nonprofit organization out of Ohio that has takes World War II, Korea. I don't do Vietnam, but I just do World War II and Korea, to Washington, D.C. to honor them for their sacrifices during World War II in Korea and their families. And it's a mission statement for them they've waited 70 years for that. So I started taking them in 2008 on 18 flights, 1,500 from Minnesota, and 70, World War II, 70 Korea veterans, and 1,300 guardians and staff with Sun Country Airlines. And that was that solved my anger management problems, because these men and women are the sweetest people in the world, because we changed their life. And in changing their life, I changed my life. Because how can I get mad at anybody? Because it's a spiritual, emotional trip that I can't, until you witness it, it's tough to explain it. But it saved my soul. And so we're able to do that on 2 times a year. And he said, well, gosh, what does that cost? And I said, it's right, it's expensive. Costs $55,000 to rent an airplane. And who does your fundraising? Well, it is a noble cause. It is a wonderful thing. And it does change people's lives. And, well, who does that? How do you get the money? He says, well, it comes down to this. The good Lord Jesus does my fundraising. We just cash the checks. We have people that give us thousands and thousands of dollars out of the goodness of their heart. Organizations that give us hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, it's been $1.4 million in 8 years. And my organization, our little one out of Minnesota, it's not mine. I'm just happen to be the leader. My wife and I are the leaders of this. And she's retired from her company now, and so she's the general. I'm just a sergeant major. And I'm on the trip. I'm boots on the ground. She's admin, and that makes it work. Plus, we have about 16 honorary frequent flyers, the people who give of their own time and treasure to go, because each guardian pays $500. The one couple that had gone on 13 flights, and they paid for every one, and they wanted to go again. I says, you can go, but I can't take your money. And he says, we don't care. You take our money, because this is worth it. So that kind of community work is as a Vietnam veteran, I can give back to the community. And that's what I think is the most important thing that I could say about Vietnam veterans, that they are still, some of them, very angry and upset about that. And they say, I understand, I was there. But the only way that you can get out of that is you got to give back to somebody else. And to help these Iraq, Afghan guys, you know, they don't understand the same stuff that we do. They have never been treated like we were. From the Gulf War, you know, we did win that. They came back as heroes. And now they're not treated as pariahs. I had people call me a baby killer. Now that was not a right thing to say. Thank goodness I wasn't carrying a pistol or something. I was an angry man, and I'm glad that the Lord kept me from any opportunity to display that in a manner that would cause me harm or them harm. So that's my ambition for us as veterans, to continue this. Now my World War II guys are getting short. I mean, their minimum age is 90. The oldest I've taken 3 of them 100 years old, and they've all passed. And the ladies are the same. They're taking a lot of women on this, the veterans who never have been recognized for their contributions. And it's not about me. It's about, it's about taking care of the community and these people who haven't had the opportunity. That's why almost 100% of these men and women who went on these flights have never had a nickel's worth of recognition. They cannot believe how it's changed their life. One lady said her husband was on Iwo Jima, was a infantry guy there, and it was awful. He never heard much about it. He had his stuff in a trunk in the basement and never talked about it. You took him on that trip, and now we can't shut him up. And so that is that's my gold star. So that's my story. I'll stick to it.